Hello to all members of this conference. I'm Antonia Meteti. I work as a primary school teacher and I'm doing a master's degree in folklore at the University of Athens. I was born and grew up in an area called Fustani. It is a village in the prefecture of Pella in northern Greece where food processing and conservation methods constitute an integral part of the local people's life with reference to the village mentioned above and the places in wide area. I was always fascinated by the fact that my grandmother, my mother, other housewives, and even whole families have transformed and provided longevity to a fruit or a vegetable, a fish or a piece of meat. This research paper is based on an assignment conducted during the seminars of the postgraduate program in folklore of the Athens School of Philosophy related to material culture and is a summary report of a postgraduate dissertation. The collection of the ethnographic material for the present assignment has begun since April 2014 in villages of northern Greece and has not stopped yet but continues to this day. Some of the villages where the research took place are Fustani, Archangelos, Piperia, and Lutrochori, which are located in the prefecture of Pella, and Pyrgi and Velvedos in the prefecture of Kozani. The periods of crisis in which we focused our attention and saw how food preservation is beneficial to our smooth-paced life are the period during and after World War II, the period the economic crisis that Greece is going through from 2010 to the present day, the health crisis that the world community is going through in the last year due to the coronavirus 19. Concepts related to tradition and transfer. Tradition is what is handed down from one generation to the next with the necessary modifications each time to adapt to the new conditions. It would be very useful for some of this knowledge that comes from tradition and the experience of the older generations not to be lost but to be infected with those of the younger ones. The local knowledge that emerges from the observation and is transmitted orally, presenting people's experience, is knowledge that whenever was ignored, it had disastrous results. It is not uncommon for products of intangible cultural heritage to be cut off from the living source of their origin so as to be archived and become museum exhibits. Methods and ways of preserving and processing some foods, such as the preparation of fruit conserve and pickles, homemade tomato sauce and composta, dry fruits and vegetables, olives, cheese, and homemade pasta, and many others, are good to pass from generation to generation and be part of a special taste and local tradition. Historical background of food preservation. The information we have about the eating habits of the Greeks is abundant and comes from their representations, uh, from texts and archaeological findings. The first testimonies that help us get closer to the daily life of the ancient world are found in Homer's Odyssey. Apart from being a shipwreck, Odysseus is at the same time a very good observer, commentator, and communicator of the past, the present, and in the future. Examining carefully the course of development, techniques, and scientific progress, we observe that a spiral-shaped course is followed as the new knowledge is added to the old one. The method of food preservation through desiccation has been known since ancient times not only for herbs and fruits but also for meat and fish. In Frathi Argolida, people cut and dried the tuna, while in the Clidi of Hipparchus they did the same with the meat of the goat and the antelope so that they could use it later. Especially in ancient Pella, There was the laboratory of Parmeniscus, where wine amphorae were made, as the Pella wine has been famous since ancient times. The lack or production of nutritional goods at certain times of the year led man from a very early age to seek ways in order to preserve them. Also, ancient Greeks and Romans made various types of cheese. Later, during the Byzantine period, there were also many food preservation techniques, many of which pre-existed and passed down from generation to generation. Fish and fresh meat that were not eaten were salted. According to sources, cooking with salted meat, pastomaguria, is more commonly reported than fresh meat. Olive oil and various herbs continue to be basic and natural food preservatives for their antiseptic and disinfectant properties. The Greek people, with the main implement of observation and experience, preserved food of plant and animal origin. The decades from uh, the decades from 1920 to 1970 remain an essential part in food preservation methods in Greece because of the influx of Greek population from Asia Minor, as my parents' family origins, the large transferring of Greeks from the countryside to the cities, and the usage of modern ways and means of food preservation, canner refrigerators, according to a manuscript from the center of Greek folklore. Furthermore, sorry, sweeteners such as petimezi, molasses, which were also used to make pastries and jams, are also being replaced by sugar. Summarizing the data that emerged from the stories of people of different ages who lived and live in the prefecture of Pella-Kozani, we would say that food preservation is achieved by applying various techniques such as the following. Dry fruits and vegetables under the sun in the open air. This is slowly beginning to decline nowadays. However, some older housewives and young people continue this beautiful and ecological practice to this day. In the summer of 2019, when I went on vacation to my village in Fustani, I also learned to dry hot peppers under the sun from an elderly neighbor called Miss Irene. At first, I thought it was too simple. Initially, you put thread through the peppers and leave them under the sun until they dry. According to Miss Irene, this is not enough. As she found out earlier, the peppers will later mold. A necessary step in the process is the deep and cross-cutting of the peppers with a knife from bottom to the top of them. After that, a thread will be put through the peppers. Only then they will be properly dried. Preservation of fruits by hanging them in a cool and shady place. Something that I strongly remember from my childhood in the winters in Fustani is the sailings in the cool warehouses to be colorfully decorated with fruits such as grapes, pomegranates, quinces, and apples. They were very beautiful, cool, and tasty. Preservation of herbs, such as chamomile, mint, oregano, and nettles, by drying them in a shady ventilated place. Also, after having interviewed some housewives from Velvet de Kozani, I saw how the vine leaves were preserved through drying in the past in order to make later in winter the delicious and traditional recipe here in Greece called dolmadakia. Dry fruits in the sun with their previous smoking with sulfur. This technique, according to my informant Anastasios Moradidis, has as basis the smoke of the sulfur, which enables the fruits to be well preserved so as to keep the flies away while exposing them under the sun to dry. According to my uncle, the dry fruits with the above technique, the so-called hosatia, were a treasure in the past due to the fact of a shortage of fruits in winter period, preservation of some foods with partial or total burial in the soil. This technique, with a hole in the ground, helped vegetables or seeds to be well protected by the frost. Also, it was a good technique to protect some foods like the wheat from the enemies during the World War II. Ways of processing and maintaining meat, wild birds and fish. In general, we would say that people used to preserve these different types of meat by salting them with coarse salt. As regards the meat, usually came from the family's pigs. At the period of Christmas, people used to make shawarma, boiled meat and preserved in its own fat. They kept it in a container in a cool cellar. Instead of boiling the meat, the people would make sausages or fry it in its own fat and after keep it for months in a pot. Fat and fry meat together. Dry meat by roasting it in the wood oven. According to my informant, Helias Melas, with the application of this method, people roasted the meat until it was dehydrated enough for later use while cooking meals. Preparation tomato sauce or red pepper sauce. Nowadays, as technology modernized, the production and the preservation of tomato and pepper sauce changed too. Now, many housewives and even though whole families boil together tomatoes, red peppers, onions, and garlic. They mash them, they boil again, and keep this delicious type of sauce in jars. Some other techniques of preserving food are preparation of pickles in jars. We need vegetables with salty water and garlic. Preservation and storage of summer vegetables with tomato sauce in jars. Homemade cheese. Preparation of homemade pasta like trahanas, petra, and helopites. Desserts from fresh fruits with sugar, jams, rezzeli, petimesi, molasses. Compostes, it means boiled fruits in jars, especially peaches or plums or others, with water and sugar. Making homemade liqueurs and drinks. Economy and ecology. Also, almost all of the interviews show the foresight of people to maintain their food in time summer autumn, where there is both an abundance of fruits and woods and help from weather conditions. Before the temperature starting to fall, housewives intend and still intend to fill their homes by making their so-called winter supplies. Women, with the help of family members, most of the time preserve food by making desserts from fresh fruits and jams, pickles and sauces. As mentioned above, the responsibility of women was to cook and to engineer ways on the one hand to feed their families with a meager means and on the other hand to save on food. Characteristic is the phrase of my mother, who considers my grandmother Despina and many other housewives in difficult conditions to be heroines, as with their foresight and very few means they managed to feed multi-member families with the necessities foods. The relationship between food preservation and ecology and economy is quite strong. People have maintained foodstuffs at a time when there are in abundance and with various techniques mentioned above, preserve them for a longer period of time. So, for example, in the winter, people can consume their own sauce made with summer tomatoes rather than buying greenhouse tomatoes during the winter that they contain a lot more pesticides and hormones. Very recently, humanity has gone through a major health crisis due to coronavirus 19, a highly contagious disease that has forced people in Greece and many other countries to stay indoors for a long time, it changed the structure of this conference. The multi-day quarantine has forced people to queue in supermarkets to get the necessary food. My village bustani, Pella, was on a 14-day quarantine from the 1st of April since April 14, 2020, and we could not leave the house, let alone visit the supermarket. This period of confinement and deprivation reminded me of stories of starvation and the confinement of all the acquaintances during World War II. Now the enemy was not people from another country, but an invisible bacterium. Both my family and many of my fellow villagers felt safer during these difficult times because there was a place somewhere in the house with some very basic food that we had preserved in times when it was sufficient. Pickles and jams, salted fish, dried fruits and herbs, homemade pasta and sauces were some of the things we had stored. We followed the example of ants, that they collect their food in the summer months, and the example uh, of our ancestors in past times, and we found it extremely useful in the modern age of such vulnerable security and prosperity. In our time, a time of economic and health crisis, perhaps the survival tool is to turn to our own strengths and try to produce and maintain as much as we can on our own. In addition, in times of health crisis, it is very important to eat natural and pure foods which we prepare at home and do not contain technical additives and preservatives. The food preservation process and the tried and tested methods used by the common man for many years can offer a lot in this direction. I would like to thank all these people who are helping me complete this work. I would especially like to thank my mother, Elisa Menteti. I would also like to thank my teacher, Miss Vasiliki Chrysanthopoulos. Both Miss Chrysanthopoulos and the rest of my professors in folklore transmitted to me the love of searching and recording ethnographic and folklore material. I hope to continue my research on food processing and preservation methods as it is a piece that excites my interest. Finally, I would like to thank all those who tried to hold this conference and contributed to find alternative ways of transmitting the knowledge. I close this announcement with a wish all to remain healthy, happy and strong. Thank you very much.